insightful remarks. Just a brief comment on what you said, and to paraphrase George Orwell, I think what the EU has done follows the logic of all refugees being equal, but some being more equal than others. We have seen that Europe has acted as an idle bystander, especially vis-à-vis the Syria crisis, for too long. And when it acted, it was too little, too late. And if it wasn't too little, it was too ineffective. Or if it wasn't too ineffective, it was definitely too unsatisfactory. What happened? We have also seen that this discussion has taken place both in Europe, but also elsewhere, and in Israel to an extent, as anti-establishment, populist, and anti-intellectualism forces have taken hold of the debate. We have seen the exploitation of fear, or the hijacking of fear. And a last comment I would like to make is that it's very different to observe any crisis, but the refugee crisis more so than others, if you only observe it through your TV screen, as compared to observing it through your window. And that difference in solidarity that has been felt has been directly connected to that. It's like Europe has tried to put extra walls in between itself and the refugee flow, keeping them in Syria if that is not possible, then keeping them in Turkey. If that is not possible, then keeping them in Greece or Italy. If that is not possible, then, you know, there has been a varied sense of what solidarity has meant, and this has undermined the principle of solidarity that has been the glue that has kept Europe together. Now we have about 18 minutes open to discussion for Q&A. And please, if you have a question, raise your hand, identify yourself and your affiliation, and if possible, indicate which speaker you want the question answered by. Yes, in the back. And speak up, because I don't see a microphone, so speak up, please. We can't hear, so perhaps... I don't know why.
You want to come forward, maybe?
Perhaps come, yeah. You can come, use this microphone. Yes.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Hopefully. Yes.
So my name is Esther Lopatin. I'm the director of the Center for European Studies at the IDF Spokesman. And I'm Esther Lopatin. I'm the director of the Center for European Studies in Herzliya, IDC Herzliya. For the moment, I'm also working with the Ministry of Science at Baden-Württemberg because I develop a model how to facilitate the integration of immigrants in Germany, which will be applicable to all of Europe. And one of the things that I said to members of the parliament from the EPP, from your competing actually political group in the parliament last week, is that one of the major problems of Europe today is lack of a concrete plan. You see,
Lack of what?
a concrete plan. It seems to me that Europe, when it comes to tackling the refugee crisis, Europe doesn't seem to have a strategic plan, a vision, how to deal with the crisis. You've been mentioning the readmission agreement. And if you intend to base your policy, among others, on signing readmission agreements or the readmission agreement with Turkey, I can tell you, you're likely to fail. Because if you're looking at the history of the EU, in the last 15 years, the European Union has signed readmission agreements with more than 15 countries in the world. Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Russia, Ukraine, with countries usually which do not have a record, considered to be have a record of protecting human rights. And the funniest thing, those countries usually, if you look at the statistics of United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, they also generate refugees to the EU. So if you look at Turkey itself, for years, Turkey has been generating refugees to the European Union. You sign an agreement with a country that, which doesn't consider to have a high record of human rights. And at the same time, looking at the situation in Turkey today, it's clear to me that in the future we're going to likely to have refugees from Turkey coming to the EU. Turkish nationals. I'm not talking about Syrian nationals. So I think that there is a time now to rethink maybe about this strategy, because clearly in the last 15 years, so many readmission agreements have been signed, and yet it did not prove it themselves as being successful. So maybe we have to rethink about the strategy and have a better strategy for Europe. Thank you.
Is there a question there?
Yeah, the question is, what's the plan?
Okay. Yes. If somebody from the staff of INSS can circulate that microphone.
No, I'll shout, don't worry. I'm very hot.
Okay, we do it this way.
Hi, Olga Deutsch from NGO Monitor, but it's a non-NGO Monitor related question. I found the entire morning very interesting. The first panel is quite distinct from the second. The first panel actually says that EU has a new strategy going from soft power to hard power, which is a game changer. I might say, and we at NGO Monitor quite carefully monitor the soft power and the impact of it in the region here. But interestingly enough, on this panel, I haven't heard a single word on the issues or challenges in terms of the integration, not of the current wave of migrants, but rather of the existing migrant population, second generation of migrants in Europe that have been brought up there, educated there, and the odds should have been that they should have been integrated at least to a certain degree. And most of the challenges we've been seeing on the security front, and we find ourselves at INSS, whose main topic here should be security, has been producing some rather destroying and devastating effects across Europe that we here in Israel have been living for years now. I would like to know, and I think that saying that too many extreme right-wing parties have been on the rise is a fact, and they have been using populistic narratives, that is also a fact. But I think not mentioning the threat and the terror and a fact, which is a radicalization, a severe radicalization process that has been devastating Europe, from Scandinavia and northern countries all the way to France, is also detaching the question of the migration from reality, and also not recognizing that some of the fears of the people across the continent are not populist, but rather fears that have to do with their lives and changing day-to-day situations. So I would like to hear your take on that, and how do you see that Europe can't cope with a new wave of migration when it hasn't really coped with the second generation migration as it is. Thank you.
Right, we'll take these two questions as the beginning. Noting, of course, that there is a difference between migration and refugees, which is a crucial distinction we all need to make in all our discussions. Hélène, do you want to start?
Yeah. What we have seen, and I think all of us, the three of us, have said more or less the same thing, that what we're seeing is more a reaction to events that, unfortunately, than a plan. And maybe it has to do with the fact that there has been a constant flow of immigrants to Europe. Certainly France has very large communities coming from Africa, Armenia, different, because of the history of the country also, which was a colonial power. We have these links and we continue to have them. So to say that there is no strategy, that's not true. I mean, Europe has always been a continent that has received and absorbed different people coming from outside and within Europe itself. Again, for instance, in Spain, there are a lot of Spaniards and Italians. And in Germany, the Turkish community is very large, and Italians and Greeks and so on. So it's not something new. What's new is that there is a conflict in Syria, and that suddenly there is a big movement of thousands of people who are coming together. They're not just coming with their families or whatever. They are just arriving en masse. And that's the problem of having to set up places where they can be welcome, because they are arriving by the hundreds or the thousands. So that's the problem, really. As to the soft power, I have tried to defend the opposite view. I don't believe, because Europe is not giving itself the means to have a defense policy, that Europe will be becoming a hard power. I think our strength is in the soft power. It is in education, it is in our culture, it is in what we can actually present and do in terms of our diplomacy. There are different approaches within Europe. There communitarism in Great Britain. We have in France, and it hasn't worked better than in the UK, the wish to assimilate people and that they will actually become French citizens. And while that worked with the first generation that came to work, but it was a different time when there was work for everybody, we now have the second or third generation that has the two identities, if you like, that they are either French and whatever, African or whatever country their parents came from, and that have some difficulties to know what they actually are. Because when they're in France, they are made always to remember that maybe they're not French, and when they go into the other country, they are made feel that they are French. So they are these people that are everything but nothing at the same time, and it's creating difficulties for them. Now, the last point, the biggest issue today for the youth is maybe to give them hope and to give them a vision of where we're going. I think time and space is escaping everybody today because of this, virtual world that we're connected with all the time. And you were saying that, war, it's on television. But when you see that there has been a terrorist attack in Iraq every day, the first day you're shocked. The next day you're shocked, but a little bit less. And then you get used to it somehow. And it's terrible to say that, but it is true that somehow we integrate the violence that goes on because it's just a little bit further. But then when the violence is in the streets of Paris, then suddenly it becomes real. And Paris was deserted for a few weeks after the terrorist attack. But now life has gone back to normal. And if there's one country where you understand that, it's possibly here, where life has to take over again. But for our young people, I think it's the lack of a future that's going to be good, that we're going to tell them that, yes, they will have a good life. In fact, we're just, and look at all of us since this morning, we had the long list of everything that goes wrong, that we should be afraid of, This is what we're serving the young people. And then some of them today, from the internet, are getting connected, and then suddenly they have a mission in life, to kill themselves and to kill as many around them. And that's their mission. But because they were somehow prepared by their environment to feel that, yes, at last somebody is giving them a mission in life. So through education, and I believe very strongly in that, through education, we need to, try to integrate people and give them a chance to, yes, play a part in life, which is not destructive, but which is to be part of constructing a world that we like to live in.
Starting from the end, it's true, although I spoke about the problems of the French and British approach to integration, it's true that sometimes we want to skip and forget about the fears of people. And also we want to think that only the right-wing agenda is bad because it is right-wing and does not touch the fears of ordinary people. And the problems are there. And the problem of security, the problem of jobs are there, but they're not the economic migrants that create this fear. It's a fear of the other. Because we didn't hear today about Poles. We heard about French in England. But French are not dark-skinned as myself and you. but they still have the same problem. They're not Muslims, but they still have the same problem in England as also people from Poland. They're hit in the streets because they're from Poland. So it's not connected to the wave of economic migrants that we have at this moment. This goes much, much deeper. And the reply of our governments, and that's what I said in the beginning, we want to close our eyes. The reply of our government is like going to the dentist. I don't want to go, so the pain in my tooth will go away by itself. And it doesn't go away and becomes infested. The same happened in our governments, because instead of seeing the example for the ordinary people again, we had 800,000 people passing through our islands and staying a long time there, and we didn't have any significant problems. The people fed them, housed them, and supported them. You should have expected an explosion of right-wing parties in Greece, of right-wing power. We do have a fascist, a Nazi party in our parliament, but the people gave their own reply. 800,000 people passed, 1/10 of our population, and stayed there for a long time. About the readmission agreement, it works. The numbers say it works. Because the readmission agreement was to stop the pull factor. And it contained that any refugee that came to Greece from Syria would be returned to Turkey, to the Syrian camps there, and another refugee from Syria would travel from Turkey to the Union to a specific place. So it was not to stop the refugees, the number of refugees coming in Europe, but to stop the pull factor. And instead of 6,000 refugees a day coming to the Greek islands, we have less than 100 a day. So the readmission agreement is the only thing that worked. Do we send back to Turkey people? No, because our asylum committees are very slow and they don't want to send back to this Turkey. This is a question that we have to resolve before the whole agreement collapses on our heads. But if we want to say about a successful European strategy, it is this. And that's why we multiplied it and proposed it to Africa. It's not based on the first reaction that we have when you see a refugee. Take him into your house, help him, support him. This is the solution that comes to us as persons. But if we want to make policies, we must look behind the personal feelings and see what policy will not attract millions of people that very soon will find Fortress Europe in the place of this Europe. And it will be, if we don't follow policies like that, supporting refugees where they are, and try to support the economic migrants, not by giving corrupted help to their countries, but trying to find ways that the billions we give are not going to the pockets of leaders there, but to the real economy. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. We're running out of time, so we're
well, maybe you can just
no?
can be very short.
Okay.
No?
Well, then we did run out of time just now.
Shame, there'll be frustration.
Thank you very much to the speakers for their excellent and insightful remarks, and thanks to all of you.